a little bit after 6 p.m. and we will get started on our workshop agenda for this evening for the Hopkins School Board. Our colleague director, Kai Thompson, will be joining us via the Google Meet virtually from another state that was posted in accordance with Minnesota statute. Welcome. It's nice to see you. And I think we will start the agenda with our PYP update. I would welcome everyone to the table to come and talk with us about the exciting things happening in our elementary schools in Hopkins.
Thank you for the introduction, Chair Andreessen. I'd like to welcome my colleagues, Principal Melissa Ness from Eisenhower Elementary, Dr. George Nolan from Gatewood Elementary, and Sarah Arneson, who's our IB coordinator at Gatewood. And around this time last year, we did have our friends provide an update to that current board about where we were with IB authorization in our 2 elementaries. And we thought it would be very helpful for our new board members to receive an update and to hear about all of the fantastic work that both buildings, principals, and their teams are engaged in to move toward International Baccalaureate authorization. So I will just turn it over to you. Thanks very much for being here this evening.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So we have a slideshow we'd like to share as well. Oh, sure. That'd be great.
So while we're waiting, oh, it's coming?
We got it.
Okay, great. I was going to ask for a goat update, but we can do this instead.
Yeah.
Also joining us at the table is Dr. Ann Ertl, Innovation Design and Learning Director.
So we can start with the next slide, the one right before that. Guys, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. And as Dr. Mary Peary Reed mentioned, we will be sharing some information about the IB journey that Eisenhower and Gatewood are on. You can go to the next slide. Just to frame the conversation, after 2018, right prior to the pandemic, our team began developing a learning framework that would cohere learning and teaching throughout the district. And in response and in partnership with first Eisenhower and then Gatewood, those schools chose to use the IB primary years program, the elementary version of IB, as their method of enacting enrichment and the Hopkins learning framework. And so our school leaders and Sarah are going to be sharing that journey this evening.
So I'm just going to share a little bit about what IB is, and specifically the primary years program. I have worked in IB schools for over a decade, and this is my 2nd year in Hopkins, but I worked in secondary previous to that with the middle years program. And the primary years program is a unique part of the IB family in that it focuses on students aged 3 to 12 and really seeks to develop young students as caring and active participants in life's journey as lifelong learners. And one of the things that I think is really appealing about IB programs is the best practices that they seek to embody. There's also kind of a quality assurance built in, as we've all experienced in this last year, a visit from our consultant, and we look forward to authorization visits within the next couple of years. And those things help, I think, us refine what we do in buildings, give us a check, help us understand and set goals with students so that what we're doing is really effective and authentic. And I think also the piece of IB that is really student-centered and holistic really aligns well with the framework that Anne was just speaking about. Inquiry and transdisciplinary learning are also key parts, inspiring student questions and helping them see connections in real-world ways. And IB utilizes 6 different themes that kind of bring those things together. Who we are is one that both of our schools explored at the very beginning of this year as a way to not only ground ourselves in our own unique identities, but our identities as communities as well. And you can go on to the next slide. And these are 3 quotes that we identified as things that really stand out in summarizing what IB is about and how we see it being really key here in Hopkins. It involves the whole school learning community. IB is intended to be for all learners, bringing about holistic opportunities for all of our students. It encourages students to inquire, so again, that question-asking piece, and really seeking to build curiosity in students, and then seeing things from different perspectives, helping students understand not only the way that they see the world, but a really important critical thinking value of how does your neighbor and how do your classmates see things, and how can we really build community even with our differences. And this is a little visual of, IB has these circle diagrams for a lot of different things, but this is just really a summary of the PYP and some things that really align well with the Hopkins framework and Vision 2031. At the core, really, who are our learners? And the IB learner profile is the traits that IB defines as really significant to who our students are and who we want them to become. And that is a really key focus and something that both of our schools have really worked on fostering in the last couple of years. And then skill development being another key piece. So not only are we focused on the content and the standards that appear in our regular curriculum, but how are the skills that students are practicing through that content significant to their learning, helping them build skills for the future and things that they can help make connections and also support them down the road. And then that transdisciplinary piece is unique to the primary years program as a way of shaping instruction that seeks to bring together learning in a way that is kind of real to life. So not just your subjects always separate, but what are the connections that we can see across them, so students are critically thinking about the world around them. Go to the next. And this kind of reiterates just some of the connections we see with the Hopkins framework and the traits of a graduate, and just some of the emphasis on being learner-centered, concept-based, and inquiry, and then also fostering not only student agency, but also teacher agency, in that all of our teachers are working to develop units of instruction that reflect who our students are, how they're growing, and the skills that they need to be developing along the way. And then also focusing on competencies. And a lot of that kind of aligns with those skills. So thinking about not just the content again, but also the skills students are developing as they progress.
Thank you. One of the things that we really wanted to work hard on is how do we connect all aspects of what we're trying to do at Gatewood. As a school, we claim to eliminate racial predictable outcomes through community development, focus on building knowledge and skills related to restorative practices in a learner profile, and also use inquiry, focus instruction aligned to PYP and outdoor learning. One of the unique things about Gatewood, we're only of 2 schools in the United States that's IB and outdoor learning program. So that's been really cool and interesting for our building. Next slide. One of the things, as we are going through our IB journey, we wanted to create a mission statement that really captured the gifts that we have in our building. Admission statement, at Gatewood, we are an inclusive community that values diversity in each student's unique story. We use inquiry and environmental education to advocate for social change and care for our world. This mission statement was produced and participated by our stakeholders, our family members, our students, our teachers, and staff. And so we created this, a lot of ideations and adjustments, but we wanted to capture people's thoughts and beliefs about who we had enter our building and how we served our families.
I'm just going to share a little of where Gatewood has been as we've progressed through our IB journey and just some of the things that we're currently working on. And I wanted to share these slides because I want to talk about some great pictures of some students. So, but this last year we started our IB journey as a candidate school. We had some rigorous training for staff. Training is a component of becoming an IB school that's required for teachers. To better understand the framework and really support and equip them for the work. We also spent some time last year working to align our state standards so that we were familiar with those as we worked to not just utilize curricular materials, but to really understand some of the deeper concepts that we could support student learning with. And then we also, I worked with a team of teachers and a couple of parents to develop some recognitions throughout our building to take that learner profile and really try to put that in action so that students started to understand and enact what does it mean to be caring in my school, what does it mean to be principled, how do those things show up in the playground, in the classroom, and what does that mean? And we developed these posters that are throughout our building. If you have a chance to come visit us, you will see those with student faces and statements around, here's how I can be balanced at recess. We also built taking the learner profile language and making it accessible to all of our learners. I worked with some of our Links to Learning teachers to really make sure that we were utilizing visuals and language that all of our students could access and that we could talk about it in ways that all of our students could participate in that part of enriching our community. And we started the work of building units, connecting standards, developing a mission statement, as Dr. Nolan shared, and just shifting some of our practices, aligning to some of the work of the IB training that we'd experienced. Next slide. And so this year, we've really delved into unit planning and using the IB framework that aligns really well to the conceptual design components that, as a whole district, we're working towards. And so teachers have been rigorously working on the writing, reviewing, and teaching of their units. And we aim to have 4 done this year at different grade levels. And then also building a program of inquiry, which is kind of IB's term for a scope and sequence of how we are enacting teaching and learning with the 6 different themes throughout the different grades, and kind of the uniqueness of each of those at a different grade level. And so you'll see some of the pictures here reflect some of the work that students have done, especially with that first unit, who we are. Kindergartners explored some of their own identity and created self-portraits. We've done recognitions where we bring students together to celebrate the ways that they have displayed the learner profile. Our 3rd graders talked a lot about values as part of describing who we are. And then kindergarten most recently was doing, with their How the World Works unit, they were talking about habitats and how animals adapt in the environment and what kinds of things they need to survive. And then that top picture is a brainstorm that our 2nd grade team did, thinking about how do we express ourselves. And one of the cool things they did to start that unit was sharing their central idea and getting students to think about, like, well, what does it mean to express myself? How do I want to do that? What are the ways that I can share my ideas and who I am with others? And then as we move forward into the rest of this year and next year, we'll be aiming to complete that scope and sequence or that program of inquiry, provide training for our new staff in order to just kind of holistically support our teachers, and then also working on the rest of our unit work, and that will be a continual part of this journey, is writing, reflecting, revising. We're always learning things as we teach, and so that will be an ongoing part of the process. And then we aim to have our verification visit in 2025.
Hello, I'm Melissa Ness, the principal at Eisenhower, and I will just highlight a little bit about what makes Eisenhower unique in our IB journey. We really have a lot of similarities with Gatewood's journey. The process of being a candidate school and going through all of those steps of creating a mission statement, writing the units, incorporating the learner profile into school-wide structures is all part of what we've done as well. One thing that is unique about Eisenhower, as you all know, is we have our language immersion programs. And one thing that IB helps us with is uniting all of our programs together. And so all of our grade level teachers are able to use those IB themes to create units together and to really enhance our collaboration, our teacher collaboration. This is our mission statement that we created last year with all of our stakeholders as well. And you can read that. And then this is a brief timeline of our PYP journey. We began in summer of 2021 by applying and being accepted as a candidate school. Since then, we've been busy writing our units. All of our grade levels have written 2 units per school year, implemented and reflected on those units. And so we're just at the very end. All of our units will be written by the end of this school year. So we're very proud of that. We've also done created and transformed a lot of school-wide systems and structures so that it aligns more with the IB framework. For example, those learner profile traits that Sarah mentioned, we have also transformed our Paw Pride to include those, for example, so that we are recognizing our students when we see them demonstrating some of those skills, like being balanced or being a thinker, being a risk taker. And finally, we will be we will have our authorization visit also in 2025. The spring of 2025 is our plan for that. And this is just an example of one of the ways that we have incorporated the learner profile traits into our building is we've created these posters as well. We have those in all 3 languages. If you come walk around our school, you will see them in lots of different areas in the building. Thank you, and I think now we are open for any questions.
Thank you so much for being here and for that presentation. I appreciate the update. Does anyone have any comments or questions for our leaders at the table?
Yeah, I do have a question. So principals, thanks for educating us about IB. I think the public, or me, am not as familiar with kind of the benefits that we get. I know that you talked about, they're better at thinking and problem solving, but can you talk a little bit about like what the promise is and what we kind of like think is a successful IB implementation?
So, can you go back to the slide with Eisenhower's mission statement? So the first sentence of our mission statement is actually based on the IB mission, which is to create students, I'm gonna mess up on the wording, but a more thoughtful, thank you.
Yep.
Create a better and more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. So that's really one of the big goals of IB. Another very big concept and underlying theme is international mindedness, which is really important to our schools and our students and their futures. And so that's another big long-term goal.
I really appreciate how self-reflection is built into the IB model so that students are learning how to think about themselves as learners, if that makes sense, kind of take that meta view to their own learning. So my kid is in 7th grade. They are interacting with the IB framework for the first time. And the amount of self-reflection around their work that I've witnessed is pretty remarkable. And so I kept thinking, wow, if they had been able to build up this skill set through their elementary years, where they might be at this point. Very grateful that they're at the point where they are, but I just really appreciate that intentional approach that, of course, is developmentally appropriate for helping students reflect on who they are as learners and how they learn.
I have a quick question. I have to try so hard not to clap after presentations. So I always want to.
What? Go for it.
Start clapping.
You can clap. You could do the clap.
The team would like your clap.
Always a silent clap. Spirit fingers. So I really do appreciate you all, like the presentation and just providing the information. Maybe this is kind of, playing off of Z's question just a little bit, like, so for the IB, so like, do they get to, I don't want to say like apply for IB, but like, how are students chosen to be like an IB candidate? Like, are there certain qualifications? And then like, also could like, if a student is an IB candidate, like, do they qualify for like, different forms of scholarships and things like that for like different programming or even college education or something?
At the primary years, it's really a school-wide initiative. So it's encompassed in all parts of our buildings. That changes sometimes when you get to a diploma, depending on districts and school models and all of those things. But at this level in this iteration, it's really a school-wide aim to really provide those resources and knowledge and skill development to all students.
Yep, and that's true at our middle level as well. So a lot of times in high schools that have IB programs, students select into the diploma program, and it typically is not school-wide.
I think one of the things that I think in the state of Minnesota and in most districts, most states consider IB gifted and talented programming. And I think what we're trying to capture is provide that opportunity for all students from an equity lens about how we approach learning as a learning community and how we're getting kids to self-reflect and approach their learning and become critical thinkers. And I think that's the wonderful thing about preparing our kids to be college and career ready as we start from preschool up, is to start honing in some of those skills that are so important.
The team already mentioned this, but I'd like to underscore the feature of transdisciplinary learning, right? So in traditional non-IB schools, then you learn math and math, you learn English and English, science and science, but an exemplary IB unit weaves content across disciplines and discipline areas, and that really helps build our students' cognition so they can apply concept across multiple subject areas and disciplines. They can problem solve with lots of information from lots of different spaces.
I can't read that.
Can people hear me? Am I able to ask a question?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Thanks so much, and agreed, really appreciate the presenter's time and energy going into getting us up to speed on this. I guess my question comes around, 2 weeks ago, we had talked about the letters training for teachers, particularly in regards to, that's around literacy. And we had talked about how that is, promotes a style of direct instruction. And so now here we're talking about inquiry across the entire school. So is there concern that inquiry might not work for every single kid within that school, and some might benefit from direct instruction. So how does that play into this?
So that's a really important question. I think that we had a lot of questions like that as well from our teachers when we first started our IB journey. And what we learned is that many schools across the world that participate in the IB framework have what's called scaffolded inquiry. And so inquiry in kindergarten looks very different than inquiry in 5th grade. Having an IB framework does not take away from the important work of foundational skill building. And so most of our K through 3 teachers are letters trained, and we do have a dedicated time for foundational skill building. We know that's very important.
Would you
Okay,
also,
thank you.
would you also say that depending on the concept and students' background information, then sometimes within the IB unit, IB framework, there will be opportunities where direct instruction is needed to then prompt a more fruitful inquiry-based process. So it's a tactic that is used when it's needed, and sometimes, like you said, to undergird the inquiry practices.
Absolutely.
And most of our units are based on state standards. And so a lot of what the state standard is asking is exemplified in an IB unit. And when we do transdisciplinary units, a lot of the state standards are embedded in there.
I think just to kind of add to that and what you were saying to Dr. Mary Perry Reed of, there's kind of an analogy of a pool when we think about inquiry. Where on the really shallow end, there's a lot of support, and there's a lot of support to provide what students need where they're at, and as we progress with skills and knowledge, that changes, right? And that with the aim that explicit instruction and direct instruction can provide some avenues towards some deeper knowledge, deeper conceptual understanding and application.
And if I may add to that, as people may know, I am on staff at Gatewood, and in particular work in the LTL program that Ms. Arneson referenced, that the PYP framework, I believe, has been adapted so that it's accessible to learners who may approach lessons differently than traditionally what we might think inquiry is. And so I think that that's in progress. This is new at Gatewood, and I think that by the time the school is getting certified, that will probably be more robust. But know that it is on their radar. It was mentioned at the table here tonight that that's something that as we're implementing or as leaders are implementing it across the district, they're taking all learners into consideration. And I did want to share just an anecdote around how PYP. I had an experience today in the hallway where a young learner, I asked if they could move because I needed to get a wagon through the hallway. And he quietly just moved out of my way, and we went past, and he said, "If I was mean, I would not have moved for you." And I said, "Really? So what does that make you because you moved?" And he said, "Not mean." And I said, "And what is that?" And he said, "That's being kind," which is one of the PYP things. So it's part of the daily discourse at Gatewood. And I did just want to ask then too, you mentioned that Gatewood is one of the 2 schools in the nation that's also an outdoor immersion and a PYP, and I'm wondering, where do you see those connections, and how is that becoming more workable or?
Well, as you know, we started in a kindergarten program 3 years ago. And we're on our journey. We're still trying to ensure that our teachers and our staff kind of understand how you teach and include students learning outside. Kindergarten is all on board. They're pretty skilled at trying to implement both concepts, but first grade is still room for improvement, and second grade. But I think as we continue to do the work of planning, professional development, and connection, just trying to get people to understand how robust learning outdoors can be, inquiry-based and designed for conceptual-based learning, you'll start to see a more robust piece to it. But there's one school in Colorado that offers that programming too. We're on our journey, and within any transition and trying to put two things together, two strategies, I call it, it takes time. But we're committed to that, and people are working really hard. Teachers are working really hard to understand what we're asking with IB, but then how do we teach it outdoors and getting kids and student agency being created outdoor learning.
May I ask why these two schools, and are there plans to expand beyond these two elementaries into our other four?
I can take that, and then the team can add if anything comes to mind. So initially, when we were building our Hopkins Learning Framework and looking at model frameworks across the world, we identified important components of learning. For example, inquiry-based, concept-based learning. For example, personalizing learning according to state standards. And we really wanted to provide, I'm going to call it freedom within fences, but it's really agency within schools, but everyone cohering around a specific framework. So it's not laissez-faire, right? Like pick whatever learning model you want and implement. No. Every principal, every school had to identify a learning model or framework that is aligned with the Hopkins Learning Framework, which we had already researched what those core components needed to be. And then if you do sort of research how schools over time have identified the common instructional practices or the pedagogy models for schools, you'll find that in some cases it was dictated, right? The district said, this is what you need to do. And in other cases, there was more agency. And we really felt that the agency is important and teacher involvement is really important. So rather than sort of do this district-wide mandate saying, okay, all schools need to be IB because our two middle schools are IB, we said all schools need to ensure that their instructional practices fit within this framework that's already been researched and vetted, but you have some discretion around what approach you'd like to take based on sort of what the energy is at the school and what teachers already know and feel compelled by. And so, for example, Meadowbrook has really taken off with project-based learning. And if you compare IB with PBL, very, very similar. But the teachers and the staff at Middlebrook really loved project-based learning. And it's so important to give our knowledgeable educators and principals some agency in what they believe is going to excite students and a learning community. So that is the path that we've taken, is to not dictate, to give agency, but all within a framework. And there's some, really, we've really stressed the importance of being within that framework. And then Anne and her team lead our monthly Hopkins Instructional Leadership Team meeting where multiple staff members, coaches, data specialists, teachers come together in this space here once a month to build our collective knowledge around the components of the learning framework, and then sites have opportunities to share out how what they are doing is aligned. Is there anything you'd like to add, Anne?
No, I don't think so. I think, the PYP journey at Eisenhower really began with this recognition that, we had language immersion, and because of the focus on global mindedness with IB, I think that was a very natural fit for Eisenhower. And I think, and at the same time, just as Dr. Mary Perry Reed said, we had teachers in other buildings who were very interested in other frameworks that still ultimately, at the end of the day, align with all of the components of the learning framework. And so,
Director Thompson, did you have a question?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and so I appreciate hearing about, we had this framework, and so then principals could choose what would be best for their schools. That makes total sense. I'm just curious, in that process, maybe for Eisenhower and Gatewood, in coming to select PYP, did you reach out to other elementary schools that have experience with PYP, maybe in Minnesota in particular, and hear their experiences on that?
At Eisenhower, we actually spent over a year researching different programs. IB was one of them. We had guest speakers come in to discuss their experiences with IB. We visited IB schools actually in the state and outside of the state. And so, yeah, we did a lot of research around the frameworks that aligned to our Hopkins learning framework that we wanted to adapt for our school.
And my journey has been, I've been a principal at IB buildings since 2005. And I just am familiar with what IB, the beauty of IB, and how it can really help and support our students. And the nice thing about also what our journey has been is that we've been able to partner with some schools. Early in our initial journey and exploration, we met with Fridley Public Schools because they were interested in the outdoor component of what kindergarten was doing, while they are a K-12, pre-K-12 school district, IB school district. And so that was a wonderful organic partnership that we've been able to do with them. I think last year we were pretty involved, and then some other schools that have visited Gatewood to kind of see how we can connect IB with outdoor learning. I mean, we had a school from Dubuque, Iowa, come and visit us, so that was kind of neat.
May I?
Have you received any feedback from your peers over in both the middle schools, well, probably more so West for Gatewood, just feedback from some of the peers at the middle schools, just how the matriculation from the students that are in your program versus the other elementaries? I know all sites have their own form of PBL and IB or competency-based learning. Just any feedback that they've provided of like, hey, we love what you guys are doing. Your students are coming in, they're ready to go and they're good to go, versus since everybody's doing something different, I'm curious about if you've heard anything directly from your peers across the across the street.
You want to answer?
While I know that they're very excited for us because they believe that will happen, I'm not sure that we're in deep enough yet to see the trajectory from elementary to middle schools. So it's pretty new.
I think maybe a couple, 3 years, 2 or 3 years, you'll start to see some of that feedback about, oh, okay, we have a sixth grader who's coming into our building who understands what the learner profile is, and then also how do we attack or learn about inquiry, conceptual-based teaching and learning.
And it has been nice on kind of the coordinator end to, the few options I've had to connect with the coordinators at the middle schools along with Laura. But to kind of envision some of that and talk about it and even think intentionally about how we work to foster some of that alignment is a really nice piece of having that option within our district.
I think the only thing that I would add, Director Ross, is the good news about all of our schools cohering around the learning framework is that we know all students are going to matriculate into 2 middle schools and 1 high school. And so the framework was designed so that students would have similar learning experiences, whether it was in an IB space or a project-based learning space, or Glen Lake has, place-based experiential learning and things. So the design of the framework is such that the sort of focus on conceptual learning and reflection, as Director Westmoreland mentioned, will translate into the IB program at the middle level, kind of no matter what.
Thank you for your time and for the presentation as well.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more quick question? How many, I mean, you may have mentioned this, how many IB schools are in Minnesota or just in different districts, or do you all know that? Are we the only, I know it's probably a lot. I was just wondering, yeah. Literally just wondering.
I get to meet with coordinators from mostly in the metro area several times a year, and there are a number of schools, PYP, MYP, and then also the diploma and the CP programs. And I would say there's, I don't know, somewhere in the dozens of, yeah.
We do think we might be able to host the Minnesota IB conference this summer in Hopkins. And so if that happens, you could all probably take advantage of joining for part of some of the sessions if there's interest.
And I'm always
Yeah.
not trying to be promoting, but I am. I think we are, Gatewood Elementary in Hopkins is the only IB school west of 494.
Oh, wow.
Southern part.
Yeah.
I think in the northern part, I think you have Rockford. But other than that, I think we're the southern part we are.
Great. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask the board to move on. Thank you so much for this presentation. Really appreciate your time and getting an update. And if anyone has any more questions about PYP or where we're at, I know it's all the way out into 2025, but that'll be coming up soon enough that we'll get the certification. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. There are about 20 high schools, 20 IB high schools in Minnesota, but that doesn't include middle and elementary, so we can get the number for you. About 20 IB high schools
Oh, 20.
in the state.
It wasn't on the agenda, but I wanted to take just a few minutes to do just a mini module around building some board culture and rapport. So does everyone have a pen at the board table? And I invite our student board reps to also participate in this exercise.
Does Kai have a pen?
I will pass out some, oh, you have paper? Does anyone need paper? Yeah. I do.
I'm a very digital person.
Thank you. You can also
Thank you,
use
Z.
your iPad if you want to.
Oh.
Okay.
There's 3 pens over here. Anybody need a pen?
Rachel needs 2.5 pens. Would you like
Anyone else
Post-it,
need
Brooke?
paper?
Oh, it's okay.
Do you ever use lipstick
one.
to write, or is that not? That's not
Oh, I
right.
need one. Well, then, yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, just want to quickly do an exercise that I did at a workshop a while ago when I was first becoming a board member, and it was very impactful for me. So just quickly give you about 30 seconds to write down as many identifiers for yourself as you can think of, like your roles. Like for me, one would be mom. It has to include school board member. But other than that, it's just who you are in different spaces. Like another one of mine would be traveler or hiker. You could do music lover, reader, daughter, niece, granddaughter, just all the ways in which you show up. And I will start the timer.
I started.
Me too.
You can tell.
I'll redo it.
No, you can keep those.
I put friend of Z, that was my first one.
It's most important.
Friend is a very good one. Okay. Do you have more than 6? So then I want you to read through those, really look at them, and you have to circle your top 3, and one of those has to be school board member.
Except I can't play anymore.
Has everyone got their 3? And if you feel comfortable, I'd ask us all to go around the table and list those 3.
Me starting? Okay.
Yeah.
My first one was student board representative, question asker / inquirer, I don't know how to say, and friend.
My 3 were student board representative, student, and son.
My 3 were school board member, writer, and fencer, but I'm off season.
School board member, mother, partner.
School board member, problem solver, and supporter.
School board member, curious and observant.
Mine were school board member, mother, and advocate.
Ex officio, school board member, mother, and superintendent.
I put school board member, mother, and a partner.
I have school board member, mom, and wife.
School board member, listener, and a volunteer.
Director Thompson?
I put school board member, husband, dad.
Great. Thank you all. And so that exercise was to illustrate that when we come to this table, we come and people see us as this one role, a school board member. So imagine all those things you wrote down, like I had, and I just did this quickly on a piece of paper, I had like 15 things written down that are really important to me. And how hard was it for you to narrow it down to 3? And really, when we show up at this table, we're seen with one, and that is school board member. And I think that that was really impactful to me to know that, or to learn how, as I move through the community and I'm out in spaces, that I have all these different hats I wear. And we all do, most of us have kids in the schools, we're a parent, we're a community member, we could be out in the community advocating for things that we think are important. And then we're also now have a new hat, some of us, that's school board member. And it can be difficult, at least it was for me when I first started, to know when I'm wearing that school board member hat and to be aware that there are hats still underneath it, but that the school board member hat is the one that's on when I'm at the table. But also that I carry all of those pieces of who I am to the table with me, and that they inform my service. So just wondering, does anyone else have any thoughts, feelings about that? I know that when I did this exercise, it was really impactful for me, so just wondering.
Yeah, I guess just thinking, right, is there a way we can maybe document what our strengths are, and then like, hey, you know, we want to work on this thing that maybe has a lot of, you know, X, and maybe, oh, maybe that's that person, and on the school board anyways. Is that something that you've thought about potentially doing?
I'm not sure if I understand what you mean.
So like let's say you have, you know, you identify as something, right? And is there ever a time where like, oh, you know, the school board has to do something, you know, and then we know so-and-so is big into that, or they identify as that, maybe we, you know, have them get involved, right? Is that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the nice things about being on the school board is you become a lot more aware of what's happening in the community and what intersects with the schools. But yeah, and definitely doing that. And then what is your role as a school board member at the board table? And how those passions and that interests can intersect and inform your work at the board table. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything you wanted to add? We've got 5 minutes.
No, I like the exercise, and I think it's just a reminder for those of us sitting at the table that when people in the community come to us with, could be a positive or a constructive comment or question, sometimes we have to remind them of the different hats that we wear and maybe ask a question around, now, are you wanting me to respond as a parent, because I'm a parent, superintendent, right? Like kind of identify, well, what hat are you wearing? And I think that can be helpful for listeners to remember, oh, wow, right, you're a parent and you are a school board member or a superintendent, because I think that especially our community sometimes wants individual board members maybe to solve certain problems, except you are part of a larger entity, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm sure it can be a little bit stressful, or at a minimum tricky, exactly.
Yeah, that's very tricky.
I have a similar dilemma sometimes that I face when I'm in our schools or in the community.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you all for participating in that. We're going to just take a few minutes break before we start our meeting at 7 o'clock. And if you have any follow-up questions around that or want to share anything, feel free to send me an email. Thank you. started.
Do you have the
Okay.
Hey, welcome. We will get started. Thank you all for being here. We will get started with our meeting of the Hopkins School Board. And we will do that once I get the agenda up. It's not coming up. Sorry. Thank you. We will go ahead and call this meeting to order on February 6th at 7:08 p.m. Our first order of business is open agenda. But before we do that, do we introduce ourselves before open agenda? I'd like to just take a moment to have our school board members introduce ourselves so that everyone knows who's in the room. And since we have one of our board members joining us virtually this evening, why don't you go first, Director Thompson?
I am the clerk on the school board. This is my first term. I have 3 kids in the district, ranging from 3rd grade to 8th grade. Thank you.
Director Westmoreland.
Hi, I'm Jen Westmoreland, she, her. This is my 7th year on the Hopkins School Board. I am the proud parent of a 7th grader at Hopkins West Middle School and a proud graduate of Hopkins High School, go class of 97.
Hi, this is Jiming Zhao. I have 2 kids in the district, in 3rd grade and kindergarten at the Xingxing program in Eisenhower.
My name is Jason Ross. I have 3 kids at Tanglin Elementary, 2 5th graders, and then 1 2nd grader. And this is my 3rd year of my first term.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Andreessen, and I parent 2 students. One is a recent graduate of Hopkins Public Schools, and one sophomore at the high school. This is my 5th year of service on the Hopkins School Board.
Good evening. I'm Rhoda Marie Perry-Reed, Superintendent. I'm in my 7th year in this role. I have a 6th grader at West and a 10th grader at our high school.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am Treasurer Rachel Hartland. I use she, her pronouns, and I have 3 children who are in Hopkins Public Schools. They are in 8th, 6th, and 4th grades at various schools. And we have lived in this community, my family and I, for 7 years now, and I'm entering my 3rd year on the board, and I'm just finishing my 1st month as treasurer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brooke Roper, and I am a newly elected board member, and I am also a parent in the district with 2 amazing, wonderful kids at Gatewood Elementary.
Thank you so much, everyone. And next, we will move on to open agenda. That's where the Hopkins School Board hears public comment, because we believe that hearing from our community members is crucial to implementing Vision 2031. There are 2 ways to make public comment to the Hopkins School Board. One is to leave a voicemail, and you can find the number for that on our website. And you can also show up here in person with us and fill out a public comment card, which is located in the back of the room. We got 2 public comment cards this evening. We have our public comment split into 2 sections. The first is a half-hour section on topics on the agenda for the evening, and the second session is at the end of the board meeting for those public comments that are not on the agenda. So we received one card from that on a topic that is on the agenda for this evening. So we will invite that person up to the board table. It is Paul McCullough. That's correct?
Yes.
Great. And as you're coming up, I will read the public comment directions that we need to adhere to during public comment. We welcome you and appreciate your input. Please, you may speak for 3 minutes. There will be a timer on the video monitors so that you can keep track of the time. And we will not respond directly to public comments that are made at this meeting. A district representative may follow up with you after the meeting. If you have written comments, we would appreciate having a copy, which will improve both our understanding of your concern and our ability to investigate and respond to the issue you raise. And personal attacks by anyone addressing the school board will not be tolerated. Persistence in such remarks by an individual or otherwise disruptive behavior shall terminate that person's privilege to address the school board.
All right.
And I welcome you to get started. When you start speaking, the timer will start.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm here to talk about the topic that's on the agenda, holistic school safety. I haven't heard the presentation, but I'm here to express my desire that the school board reconsider putting police officers back in the school resource officers position at the high schools and middle schools. I have 4 reasons that I believe that will be important and that you should consider it. School safety. I believe in order to keep our schools safe, we need to work with our police partners to get school resource officers back in the school, not only for the immediate life safety response they provide, but maybe more importantly, for a resource to hear and see and work with school staff to prevent any incident from happening. The next reason, build student trust. I think it's a very important part and a role for a school resource officer to be part of the school every day, being seen and getting to know the staff and as many students as they possibly can, interacting in a positive way. Personally knowing each other relative to the resource officer and students and staff is a wonderful way to build trust and confidence with students. The other thing I'll mention about students is, in your high school, you have students who want to or are considering to become police officers. What a better way for them to get some exposure and meet some police officers in a non-crisis situation than to have a police resource officer there. Building community trust. Obviously, over the past number of years, community trust has been eroded based on some specific horrific individual police actions. But I believe that those are by far the exception. Most of the police officers are hardworking and committed to their career. So I believe that these incidents, I firmly believe that the horrible incidents don't reflect the day-to-day efforts of the vast majority of our police officers. Fourth, I will mention that my background is that of a retired police officer with the City of Bloomington. I worked as a resource officer and became the city's emergency manager. After I retired, I worked with this school district for about 4 years on their emergency plan. Another area of concern, aside from the resource officer component, is working on the crisis plans and having our police and fire officers being involved in your drills and your planning and your training. And I had contact with Captain Mahan from the Minnetonka Police Department and Lieutenant Luke, I don't recall his last name, on the fire service. And they have not been involved in any of the safety drills. that the schools are required to perform. And I just think that if you want to talk about holistic school safety, including our police partners, not only on the resource officer side, but also with our drill and emergency plans are very important. I do have a document with some information, and I will email it, and you can distribute it from there. All right, thank you.
That'd be great.
Thank you,
so
Paul.
much. Thank you. So next, we will move on to our student board representatives report, which I think we all unanimously agree is our favorite part of our board meetings. And our treasurer Heartland would like to make an announcement before that starts.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen. And yes, I wanted to take just a moment to say I'm the advisor of the student board rep program that I do in conjunction with new board member director Jimeng Zhao. And wanted to point out that our program is very unique. It is not every school district that even today invites student voice to their board table. And Hopkins, like so many things that we do, we're one of the first in the state to implement this program. Our program is older than the reps at our table. Our program is 25 years old. And I don't know if everyone knows that, but it is really kind of a cool fact to hang our hat on. And tonight is important because we have expanded our program for the first time to not include only members from our wonderful high school who have done a fantastic job representing student voice and student needs. But we have a new member joining us today from our virtual EDU program, Amina. And I will not dictate who is going first in order to not shine a spotlight too closely on you. But I wanted to say that it took a lot of bravery to step into this new role, and I really look forward to partnering with you and virtual EDU leadership on what this role can look like. Thank you for being here today.
So who is going first?
I'll begin, yeah.
Great.
Okay, my name is Elif Öztürk. I am the senior cohort representative of the school board. And I have a few updates on what is happening at the high school. Registration night was yesterday, February 5th, and I know a lot of parents and students learned a lot about, what classes students are going to have to take in order to complete all their credits. And in the coming weeks, students will actually begin registering for next year's classes, but I won't have to be dealing with that, which is good. And then we had the LAC breakfast a few weeks ago, and we thanked legislators for supporting our students and listening to the recommendations created by the LAC, most notably being the free lunches for all students. So that was really amazing that we could have the opportunity to actually thank them in person, and we just got to socialize with them, we being the students who are on the LAC. And then currently, heartograms are being sold during lunch, so students can buy one for $5, which ends tomorrow. And you can send it to a teacher or a student, and it comes with a song, a flower, and a candy, which is something we've always done since I was a sophomore, so I think it's cool that they're continuing that. Recently, the Royales placed at sections and are going to state for Jazz and Kick, which is a historical achievement for our dance team. They were absolutely ecstatic. And lastly, a trip to Ghana is being planned for scholars in AP African American Studies for next school year, thanks to Ms. Heimlich. So eligibility includes those who took the class this year and those who will take the course next year. And I think this is such a great opportunity for our students, and I look forward to seeing it happen.
Okay. My name is Praise. I'm a junior representative. Okay. Speaking more on the LAC breakfast, it was so fun. The culinary team made the breakfast, which was amazing. And I also got the opportunity to speak about the new HOSA chapter at the high school, which stands for Health Occupation Students of America, and also some CTE classes at the high school, those two being Exploration of the Medical and Health Fields, and then another one also being PROPEL, which stands for Professionals Providing Experiences for Life. In addition to this, in our weekly Hopkins District newsletter, we got to have a high school scholar spotlight, and then we also had some information shared about the school supplies drive being planned for the month of February, and seniors got to learn more about the panoramic photo, which will be taking place tomorrow.
My name is Mia Osman. I'm also a junior representative. Mine's is kind of all over the place, but we recently had class meetings, and just like the last class meeting, students nominated teachers and teachers nominated students. We also have, at the class meetings, we also discussed new cafeteria expectations and rules. So the new rules are that everyone has to stay seated until your table gets dismissed at the last 5 minutes, and there are no moving chairs from one table to another. The no moving chairs has been effective. I feel like it really reduced the cleanup and made the lunch ladies jobs easier because they are in the kitchen all day making food for us, so it's nicer for us to leave less of a mess for them. But the no dismissal till 5 minutes has caused a little problem, even though it had good intentions. So now that everyone's being dismissed the last 5 minutes, basically the same time, the line to put the dishes away has been extra long. So it takes extra long for us to get out of that line, throw away our plates and stuff. But overall, I feel especially the don't move your chair to another table, that's actually been really helpful for the lunch ladies. And then, so last weekend, the Royal Productions performed their one acts. I went, and one of my favorite ones was Hard Candy. They're still performing one acts coming up. There's going to be 6 in Robin Hood. And for the Robin Hood one act, they're actually holding fighting choreography practice for anyone who wants to participate, because if they don't feel like they're capable of fighting, or they don't know, they just want to give it a try, they can just come and practice. And then today we started registration. We filled out the worksheet today, and then there has actually been a big change in our social studies department. So starting with the class of 2028, AP Euro, AP World History, and World Studies will be offered to them. AP US History and US History will be offered to sophomores, and then juniors will, no, either in your junior or senior year, they will have to take AP Government. And then finally, the boys ski team placed second place for sectionals, so they're on their way to state. And for the girls soccer team, I apologize if I say her last name wrong, but Daphne Grobstein made it to state, so hopefully they do well and they win. Thank you.
My name is Manuel Wahyu, and I'm the freshman student board representative. This past week, the Don Bosco Band, made up of 42 students from Costa Rica, came to Hopkins. They stayed with Hopkins host families, as well as collaborating with the Hopkins Wind Ensemble. They also performed for the high school during a Royals Connect, and they also performed in this building for the Junto Spanish Immersion families. Many winter sports are wrapping up their seasons, and yesterday the varsity boys and girls Nordic ski team had their sections, and earlier today the Alpine varsity boys and girls ski team had their sections. Math League won their section with 59 points, and tonight there is also a girls and boys varsity basketball game against Eden Prairie.
Hi. My name is Amina Tisak, and I'm the sophomore virtual ED representative. I don't have an official report today, but I wanted to introduce myself and say a couple of things. One, I'm really excited to be here and to advocate for virtual ED students in a way that they haven't been able to be, I feel like they haven't been able to be as present at the board meetings, and I'm glad to be able to represent them in this way. And then two, I wanted to thank all the people who helped me get here, including Miss Carol Tracy, the teacher who recommended that I apply, Miss Rachel Hartland, Dr. Tiffany, and all the other student reps. Thank you for your time and for all your hard work.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome. Thank you for being here. Well, thank you all for your reports. Are there any comments or questions for our student board reps?
I have a few questions. This is something that we discussed at your guys' most recent meeting, and I won't talk about it more unless you would like to. But the board members, the student board rep members, said that they appreciate our questions and like it when we have them for them. And I do have questions. I actually always did. I just didn't know if you wanted to hear them. Praise, is HOSA new at the high school?
Yes, it's very new. We're so happy to have it. We actually meet tomorrow morning, but yes, it's very new.
Like this year?
Yes.
You're a founding member?
Yes.
That's really cool. Well, congratulations. Mia, how often do you have class meetings and what do those look like?
They usually happen at the end of the term or when a new term started for the end of that term. This one has been, this has been something new, but as I mentioned, they have been having students nominate teachers and teachers nominate students. And they usually just go over expectations from what has always been said, don't be tardy, other stuff, and sometimes they'll include new things like the cafeteria rule, or they also talked about registration because that is something that's happening this month, and it's just a mixture of things that the admin puts for us or sets for us. Yeah.
Thank you. I could go on, but doing my other.
I have one. Mia, you said there's some changes to AP. It sounds like we're expanding accessibility. How are students receiving that? Good, bad? Is there a queue now?
I don't think, since it doesn't really affect any of us, because it starts for class of 2028, most of us just really don't really care. No, sorry. My brother, he is class of 2028, and he was a little worried because he was like, oh, I thought I was just gonna take civics and just be then take APs later on. But now he's like, oh, AP Euro now, AP World, I don't know which one. That's something I want to bring up because it's something new to our school. Because it's always been civics 9th grade, AP World 11th, history 10th. So yeah.
It is based on a new law from the state legislature that we are now, schools are now required to do their civics instruction in 11th or 12th, well, I think 12th grade. And we in Hopkins always did in 9th grade. So that's why it's had to change at the high school.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair Andreessen, may I ask a question?
Yes.
So I heard you were going to Ghana, or you're, wait, did you say
I
Ghana?
wish. Are you serious? No.
Oh, I thought, okay, maybe I heard,
wish.
I thought that you all were going on a trip.
For AP African American Studies class, next year Ms. Heimlich is planning for students who took it this year and then next year to go on a trip. So it's a super cool opportunity. She's planning it right now.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering, I'm like, can board members go?
If you take the class.
Right?
There's chaperone opportunities. So if you would like to go, if you obviously pay the money and volunteer to be a chaperone, you can go.
Cool.
Anyone else? Well, thank you so much for being here tonight and for your reports. I'm always interested at what's going on at the high school, so I don't hear anything from my high schooler, so I learn everything from you. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Mary Puri Reed for the superintendent report.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen. And as our students have alluded to very well, it's a very busy time. We are in the second week of our new semester. Elementary report cards have been distributed, grades have been posted, and there's lots of activity from registration to sports and athletics, competing at sectionals and state. And of course, many of us are gearing up for HEF Royal Bash. Meadowbrook had an amazing turnout at their student showcase night. For many parents and caregivers, this was the first time for parents to see and experience the school's shift in instruction, moving from traditional instruction to project-based learning, which incorporates standards-based learning across multiple subject areas and is driven by the interests of students. Kindergartners displayed their Winterbirds projects. First graders designed and constructed cardboard arcades with mechanisms like flashing lights. Second graders' projects wove together themes connecting past, present, and future. Third graders created their own zoos and wrote their own constellation stories. Fourth graders studied and built their own national parks. And fifth graders hosted open mic sessions featuring storytelling and musical performance. Glen Lake took their 5th graders to Highland Hills to learn skiing, and they have been doing this field trip for almost 15 years. Students took lessons in the morning with Highland instructors, and by the afternoon, all of the students were off on the bunny hill and exploring the larger hills off of the chairlifts. This is a favorite field trip for Glen Lake staff because students learn a new skill that they would most likely not have had the opportunity to learn, and staff have shared that many students start the day very nervous and scared, and by the end of the day, they cannot wipe the smiles off of their faces. They're having so much fun. Students learn that having a growth mindset is crucial and that they can accomplish anything when they work at it. Glen Lake 5th graders had a different kind of treat just a few days ago. They had the privilege of listening to a firsthand account of the Holocaust from survivor Riva Kibort, the great-grandmother of 3 Glen Lake students. Miss Riva shared her harrowing experience living through multiple concentration camps when she was their age. She explained how she and her sisters survived in cruel and unsafe conditions, witnessed executions, and lived under constant fear. Miss Riva attributed her survival to being with her sisters. The camp that she was imprisoned in was liberated when she was 11 years old, and then Miss Riva lived in refugee camps and orphanages before making her way to Ellis Island and eventually to Minnesota. First-hand accounts of the Holocaust are becoming rare as those impacted are aging out of being able to tell their stories. Students were joined by many Glen Lake staff and community members, and we want to thank Miss Riva for your bravery and recounting your experiences for our students. As our student board members mentioned, 17 Hopkins families hosted students and teachers from Costa Rica this last week. IDL bilingual specialist Rushi Shong put together a suite of events and experiences to keep students and their teachers engaged while learning about Hopkins and Minnesota. The Costa Rican students were members of Banda Sedes Don Bosco, one of Costa Rica's oldest bands. They performed alongside our high school's wind ensemble last week, and 20,000 Costa Rican viewers watched the concert via live stream. It was a night to remember, and what's extra cool is that our band and orchestra students will see their friends again when they visit Costa Rica in April. This registration season, CTE, that's Career Technical Education Coordinator, Cara Lavon, is promoting career pathways at Hopkins High School. Perhaps you received a postcard in the mail. One such course is Medical Fields Exploration. Parent Care Supervisor and Certified Surgical Technologist Sarah Horlbeck came in to talk about her career, and students got to gown up for the experience. Students learned that a surgical technologist is a vital member of the surgical team who prepares for and assists during surgery. Students learned about this role and also about the steps to become one. Also, as our student board reps, you all are getting really good at sharing all the highlights. Congrats to our math league on Meet 4. They recently placed first in a very close section, 6 AAA meet. If they place first again on February 12, then they will be invited to the state meet in March. At least 2 of these math leaguers are kids of Hopkins teachers. We are grateful to teacher Brent Herring for coaching this team. Congratulations to Liam Urbanowitz and Lucy Deng Hartog for being our 2024 AAA award winners. The AAA award recognizes high school seniors who maintain a GPA of 3.0 or higher and actively participate in Minnesota State High School League-sponsored athletics and fine arts activities. This is a really incredible achievement, and we congratulate Liam and Lucy. Also mentioned earlier, the Hopkins Royals dance team is making program history by qualifying for the state dance team tournament in both jazz and kick. The last time they represented Hopkins on the state floor was in 2013 with their 4th place Live and Let Die jazz routine. This year, or the year prior to that, the Royals went to state with their kick routine placing 10th. This will be the very first time since the dance team joined the Minnesota State High School League in 1997 that they will compete in both jazz and kick at state. So you can watch them at the Target Center next weekend. Recently, approximately 80 people, including students and families, participated in an American Indian education winter storytelling experience here at the Wetlands Cafe. The evening began with a large feast with authentic Native American food, followed by story time. The speaker was Seneca elder Hope Flanagan, who tells stories in a traditional way. And in American Indian culture, stories are to be told in this way only in the wintertime when there is snow on the ground. There must have been snow on the ground, maybe just a touch of snow back on January 19. We have approximately 150 students in Hopkins who identify as American Indian. We're very thankful to our program leads, Annie Fau and Deb Andreen, who plan authentic opportunities to build our knowledge. Just today, Hopkins had the honor to co-host a professional learning event with the Minnesota Apple Education team. This event was organized to provide skill building for Metro educators and learning technology folks. There were 2 iPad learning opportunities offered to explore how we can empower all learners through the use of built-in accessibility tools and engage early learners through intentional use of technology. Here's a snapshot of some members of the Hopkins team who engaged in the event to support inclusive, accessible, and engaging personalized learning throughout Hopkins. Thank you to IT Director Wetter and Instructional Design Futurist, Dr. Tiffany, for organizing. Were there others who helped organize? Our Apple friends. And Apple friends. Thanks to both of you. In Hopkins, we are proud to have incredibly gifted teachers who not only care deeply for their students, but have developed teaching practices and instructional design skills that make them the best and the brightest. Each year, our principals and sometimes even parents and community members enthusiastically nominate Hopkins teachers for the prestigious Minnesota Teacher of the Year Award. So congratulations to the following 2024 Minnesota Teacher of the Year nominees: Sarah Gleason, Tyler Martin, Anna Muir, and Sarah Roberts from Meadowbrook, Monica Grubb from Glen Lake, Megan Klein, who teaches special ed at Gatewood, Edwin Langari and Donghong Laoshi at Eisenhower, Ellen Wu at Alice Smith, Laura Jensen at North, and Jacques Joachim from the Hopkins East Learning Program. And last but not least, Susan Alt and Jean Severson from Adult Options. We will be following each of you as the process moves forward. Good luck. We're so proud of you. This week is National School Counselor Week. We're grateful to all of our school counselors for all that they do for our students. We have a full-time counselor in each elementary school and at Virtual EDU, 2 to 3 counselors at our middle schools, and 6 counselors plus a college and career specialist at our high school. Our counselors facilitate social emotional learning for our students. They provide SEL support individually and in small groups for students. They sit on or lead student assistance teams and do so much more. Our school counselors know our students deeply and they offer a lot of value to our schools. So thank you, counselors, for all you do. And this is the final slide, but I just want to say also for our community, we are going to be sending out a survey to all parents and caregivers, all grades 6 through 12 students, and all Hopkins staff. And the backdrop of the survey is during the 21-22 school year, we surveyed our community around 2 significant shifts in our school system: school start time and transitioning 6th and 9th graders to middle schools and high school. About 60 to 70% of staff, students, and caregivers weighed in to offer their input for these changes. And so we implemented those changes in the following 2 years. So now we want to survey our community, including staff, parents, caregivers, and students on the impact. Most of the questions will ask, has this had a positive impact on you, a neutral impact, or a negative impact? And so be looking out for the survey and really encourage all of our community members and students to complete it. It'll be great data for us to look at as we iterate or tweak moving forward. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Mary Perry-Reed. Are there any comments or questions from my board colleagues? Well, I just want to also add my congratulations to the Teacher of the Year candidates. There are a lot of familiar names on that list, so I am very thrilled, and fingers crossed. With that, we will move on to an approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the agenda.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved. We will move on to approval of the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as it appears?
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the consent calendar is approved. We will now move on to the treasurer's report.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen. I have a small bit of historical context to ground our report in today, and that is with regard to some history around public education and its funding. Public education in the U.S. is the legal responsibility of each individual state's government, and our Minnesota State Constitution from 1858 plainly recognizes the importance of, quote, the intelligence of its people, end quote, and therefore it goes on to say it's the duty of the legislature to establish a system of public schools and shall make provisions by taxation in order to fund those schools. And our very first schools were funded strictly by property taxes, but our state began to more directly fund schools in the early 1900s after it became clear that a property tax-only mechanism produced large disparities between groups of students, even within a school, and certainly between one school and the next. And the current funding model and ratios have been in place since the late 1980s, and the between inflation and the cost of paying teachers and staff fair wages, those increases have outpaced any increases in the state's per pupil formula every year since 2003. So that means every year, all school districts have to make hard decisions and be very scrupulous in order to do more with less money. And Hopkins is no different. And therefore, we have many layers of scrutiny on our budget here. And I will not get into all of those layers now. I will save that riveting information for an upcoming meeting. But it is important to know that that budgeting process is a very long one, and it is underway here for the coming school year here at Hopkins. And we will hear some initial reports from our Citizens Financial Advisory Committee at our next board meeting. A goal of all my reports will be to attempt to highlight what it actually takes financially to run our buildings, educate every one of our students, and fund the thousands of moving parts here that are operation. During this last period, January 18th to January 30th, we paid dozens of maintenance and repair bills across our entire system. We repaired a pool, several refrigerators and a walk-in freezer. We updated a fire suppression system at the high school, did safety checks on various boilers and heating system components, replaced fans and sensors, fixed doors, patched and painted walls, replaced a leaky relief valve and a kitchen warming drawer, swapped out a speaker, and installed a new hood fan in a science classroom. As you might imagine, we have dozens and maybe literally hundreds of miles of electrical wiring and plumbing, and millions of dollars of heating, cooling, cooking, audio, and safety equipment spread across our district. We're obligated to keep all of that in safe and working order for our students and our staff. And so I wanted to give a quick thank you to our facilities and maintenance teams who do amazing work by the dozens of work tickets every single day. We paid $44,199 to Total Admin Service Corp for retiree benefits. So that's one way in which we as an employer continue to support our valuable workers even after they've retired and no longer teach in our buildings. And you might remember that we also paid TASC $258,000 for our last period as part of our obligation to contribute to teachers' flex spending accounts. We paid $18,545 to Blake School, a private school within the Hopkins boundary, as part of our requirement to pay for parts of their technology subscriptions and curriculum. And in the last report, we had paid almost $8,900 to support another private school. Transportation this period cost $234,625. And that includes a bit over $12,000 in charges that fall under our McKinney-Vento program, which goes to support students experiencing homelessness. And for transportation specifically, that support might look like providing rides to and from school for a student who has to temporarily reside outside our district boundaries. And those rides ensure that the affected student can stay in their comfortable environment amongst their teachers and friends in the midst of their family's housing challenges. A single snowfall event in January incurred a $3,850 snow removal bill, and our unseasonably warm temperatures are having us underspend our plowing and salting estimates. We had $44,000 in expenditures associated with our really robust community ed program to pay this past session's various licensing fees, buy supplies, and pay dozens of instructors. Our electrical service cost $17,100 for this 2-week period, directly on par with last period's 1-month charges of $34,000. And a final expensive note was $24,451 paid for expenses related to our student-teacher program. That pays for background checks, trainings, and various fees to their schools and associated agencies. Participating in that student teaching program is a valuable way we contribute to the instruction of tomorrow's teachers, and it helps us recruit new and talented people to work in our buildings. And it does not, like virtually all recruitment and retention practices, come for free, and it's not a cost that we often consider. With that, I move that we approve total disbursements in the amount of $1,392,639.54 for the period of January 18th to January 30th, 2024.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion?
Can I ask a quick question? Thanks for such a great report, Treasurer Hartland. Under building construction, is that where those repairs that you mentioned, like the pool and checking boilers and stuff, that falls under that one?
Do you mean as part of that front page kind of breakdown
Yes.
of the costs?
Exactly.
Probably I should call it back up to answer that.
No, that's okay.
We can do that here.
I figured construction and repair would be about the same thing, so.
They do have further into the report, there are construction projects like to bus depot parking lots, roofing projects that are called out by like a project number, and those come later in the report. I could not answer truthfully at this moment if all the repairs fall into that same category. It will become more clear under our Oracle software upgrade.
Okay.
Director Thompson, do you want a specific answer from our?
No, I'm all right. Thank you, though.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? The treasurer's report is passed. And we will move on to new business with our holistic school safety and restorative practices report. I will turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen. I'll just provide a quick framing as our presenters come forward. So we are going to welcome to the table our Director of Innovation, Design, and Learning, who will support our District Coordinator for Restorative Practices, Maria Berry-Boyne. Welcome, Maria. Welcome, Anne. And then we also have our Director of Specialized Services, Fonda Contreras, who will support our District Consultant on Holistic School Safety, Chris Carr. Thanks to all of you for putting together a presentation and being here this evening. So just for a little bit of background here. Oh, Mr. Wetter, welcome. So we have a district-wide holistic safety team that Chris Carr leads. Also on that team is our Director of Business Services, Director of IT, Director of Special Ed, Superintendent, Assistant Director in Special Services, Brian Stanley. Who am I forgetting? Anyone? Is that it? Oh, and Mr. Newman, our Buildings and Grounds Supervisor. And so we meet bi-weekly, and we have a set of projects and deliverables that we are tracking our actions against. And then we wanted to pair restorative practices with our security and safety report tonight because, of course, we need physical, cyber, holistic safety in our schools, but we also need to buttress our teaching and learning practices, our school and classroom climate with wellness and restorative practices. And so we think about this as holistic safety and school support. And we also want to build our school board members and community members' knowledge around restorative practices. So you'll hear from both groups, but really think of this as two entities working in tandem. We're not always super in sync, but we're working hard to really couple our efforts so that the support we provide our schools is holistic. And then each of our schools also has a holistic safety team with specific members, and we work with those individuals as well. Which presentation are we doing first?
I believe we're doing restorative culture.
Oh, okay. I think so.
Okay, perfect. So we'll hear about restorative culture and practices, and then we'll get the school safety and security report. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Will you have those? So there will be some handouts that'll be coming around to the board members and to student reps if you'd like one. Okay. Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Mary Perry Reed and school board members. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you this evening. My name is Maria. This is my second year in the district, but it is my 33rd year in education, which means I probably could have taught almost everybody at this table. I have never worked at another school or district throughout my 33 years that is more innovative, brave, inclusive, and full of heart as Hopkins Public Schools. I mean that very sincerely. As we delve in, I'd like to get to know each of you a little bit better and get an understanding of your understanding of restorative justice, restorative practices, and restorative culture. So if I could, if you would just take a moment and think to yourself, if someone asked you, how well do I know, or what do I know about restorative justice, restorative practices, or restorative culture, would your answer be a 1, not very much. 2, I know a little bit, let's talk. Or 3, I know a lot. What questions do you have? Could you show me with just showing me by your fingers, 1, 2, or 3? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
So go ahead, Natalia. Thank you. So as Dr. Mary Perry Reed mentioned, our work with restorative culture building is rooted in our learning framework. And there's a reason that was very intentional. We believe that learning occurs and is relational in nature. And so that's why even though, typically it is not considered perhaps within the realm of classroom pedagogy, we really believe that our instruction and all of our policies and processes that help run our schools must be rooted in our restorative beliefs. And so I wanted to show again the learning framework, and you'll see that all of our teaching and learning is happening then within the frame of restorative culture.
Thank you. One of the hallmarks of restorative culture is that every voice is heard. I'm inviting your voices tonight. Please share 1 to 3 words that you hope others would use when speaking of Hopkins Public Schools. Try to just give yourselves a moment and think, what would I want people from outside of our district or within our district to say about Hopkins Public Schools? If you could think of 1 to 3 words. And if someone could start us off, and then we'll just continue around to the left. Whenever you're ready.
Courageous.
Outstanding.
Relevant.
Loving.
Responsive.
Inclusive.
Proactive.
Passionate.
Passionate.
Innovative.
Loving.
Student-centered.
Inclusive.
Collaborative.
Diverse.
Multifaceted.
Thank you. It's a pretty beautiful picture of what we hope our district is and what we're trying to embody. Restorative Culture and Vision 2031. During the 2021-22 school year, the HILT Restorative Practice Subgroup and the Hopkins Restorative Culture Steering Committee developed this diagram that you can see to highlight the why, the how, and the what of restorative culture. I came in the next year, and what I've been trying to do is to really learn about the history and then to spell out and organize and make a little bit more digestible what our why, our why, our how, and our what are.
Maria, I know you would want this called out because you are authentically inclusive, but we neglected to include Kai. He's online. Director Thompson is online, so I know you would.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm totally fine. I would have said global, but we can keep going.
Thank you so much. I apologize. Thank you.
If she learned
Appreciate
about it
that.
later, she'd be very upset, so we're just doing it right now. Thank you, Maria.
Yeah. Okay. So, to answer why, we identified the historically unhealthy characteristics of all public schools. So these are not traits that are just in our district. Instead of power over and silos, we want a sense of belonging, which is vital to prevent conflicts, promote positivity, and create an environment that's conducive to learning. Instead of suppressing misbehavior and using domination and focusing on failure, we recognize that difficult experiences and mistakes are really opportunities to learn about ourselves, about our self-efficacy, empathy for ourselves and others. These can be cornerstones of citizenry and relationships. Instead of authoritarian, retributive actions that fuel the school to prison or deportation pipeline, restorative practices provide the opportunity for problem solving, collaboration, decision-making, and they actually promote cognitive flexibility. Instead of exclusion and isolation, devaluing students when they are most in need of our support and connection with us, we now want to empower students, empower everyone to connect to their agency, take ownership of their feelings and actions, and contribute to our community. All of this supports our anti-racist, equity, and inclusivity work. How are we doing this? We now have an onboarding and continual professional development for all staff to restorative justice, practices, and culture. We do this work in conjunction with anti-racism, trauma-informed education, and social-emotional learning. I partner closely with Dr. Brown, our Director of Equity and Inclusion, and with our Human Resource Department. This work supports efforts to help our staff examine their own biases and explore new restorative mindsets. Dr. Holm, our data scientist, continues to make data more and more accessible for all staff. Dr. Mary Perry Reed highlighted her work with the big data, and there is a data cloud, an example of some information from the data cloud. We have a lower suspension rate this year overall. We're on track to cut our suspensions by 25% this year. We also have slightly higher percentages of our events ending in restorative practices, reset, or mediation this year. So when things go wrong, we are working towards meeting our scholars with restorative action, with support to build relationship with them and help them to self-reflect. Another example in IDL, we've reviewed sense of belonging for both staff and scholars. To better understand student sense of belonging, we reviewed panorama data and then went and interviewed students and found overarching themes that encompass our entire district. Students feel empowered to help build inclusive communities with shared responsibility through programs such as outdoor education, the houses that we have at some of our elementary schools, language immersion programs, field trips, and clubs. Students felt that their input has been acknowledged and that they affect change because of things like the implementation of soft starts at schools, being allowed and encouraged to get up and move during classes, staff involvement with their families, and a focus on SEL. Students spoke of their access to reliable, proactive adults, such as counselors and social workers, and principals that know every student's name. They shared that they appreciate small communities that foster deep connection. And they noticed the focus on restorative, transformative relationship building and how this makes school more enjoyable and positively impacts their desire to engage. We reviewed the responses to staff wellness survey and found that a very large number of our staff feel a strong sense of connection and teamwork, take pride in their work, and feel supported by their supervisors. Last year at Hopkins Public Schools, we created a behavioral alignment team to begin working to study how we identify concerning behaviors, our responses to those behaviors, and the supports we have implemented. We've created an initial alignment of these at the elementary and secondary level. What we are doing to intentionally implement restorative culture. We use research to determine what has been happening and is happening in our district, what MDE, state legislators, leaders in our state, our nation, and the world are exploring and developing in relationship to restorative justice and restorative practices. This informs our intentional systems, that are supported by professional development, onboarding and exiting, district-wide restorative culture team project plans, behavioral alignment and in elementary and secondary, and responses to harm, connection to our district holistic safety team and the holistic safety model, integration into district MTSS, and more. And this helps us develop dedicated resources, such as continued funding of restorative culture at each site and district support for all staff. While working with all stakeholders, we further create transparency through documentation, two-way communication, we both listen and share, systems to share information and engage community members, such as our shared drive, newsletters, our district kickoff, professional development, project plans, restorative culture, innovation configuration map. All of this is supported by data, which continues to help us to determine root cause analysis, address deficits and needs and our successes, and then create implementation plans and support for each site and program. Do you have questions?
Hi, Maria. So thanks for your presentation and pushing everything forward in the district. Really appreciate that. And I'm really glad that you talked a little bit about how the numbers have been changing due to our work, and I think that's just so critical. And I think and it sounds like we're still working on it a little bit, but is there initiatives to, get all this good work out in front of the board and the public? I think there's always some trepidation when something new comes in, and there's whatever, right? People are concerned, and so I think if we're doing the great work, we need to communicate that. So I'd like to hear what you're planning on that.
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. So earlier this year, we had, excuse me, an event that we shared with HREI, Hopkins Race and Equity Initiative, where we brought 3 leaders in restorative justice in the state of Minnesota, someone from the Minnesota Department of Education, from one of our surrounding school districts, and a woman who runs a restorative justice program with people who are coming out of incarceration, and for young adults who are also facing legal action. And they came and they spoke, but before we had a moderated discussion. We also sat down in circles. So we invited family members through all of our principals' newsletters. We also sent out information through HREI. And we're hoping to do more things like that at each of our sites because we cover so many different municipalities. And we won't need to bring leaders in from around the state because we have people that are trained in our district that are doing incredible work in restorative justice, restorative practices, and our restorative culture. Is that good? Is that?
Yeah, I think we just need to communicate to the public and really drive home that, hey, it's working, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're doing great stuff, it's working. Here's the data that shows it's working. I think, I think showing and not really telling is going to be important as people, digest it and
Yeah.
as we mature.
We tried to make that night kind of an interactive and immersive night so that people could experience it as well as get information from leaders. Thank you.
Director Joe, we also visited a few of the PTOs last spring to talk about restorative practices. Actually, we visited every PTO, but the parents had a choice of what topic we would go deep into for that session. So I know we covered restorative practices at Tanglin and Alice Smith, and we'd like to continue making sure that that there's an opportunity for every elementary school PTO meeting to have a focus on restorative practices, because we have heard from parents that they want to understand it more deeply, and and what it kind of looks like in classrooms and in schools. So we'll continue with our outreach.
Absolutely. One other thing is the one-pagers that you received in that packet, those will be forward-facing and going out to our greater community, I believe, through the district website.
I think so.
Yeah, and so we've been developing things like that, not only for the greater community, but also things to make it accessible, quick reference for our teachers as well, and staff members. The small restorative culture question cards, teachers have those, and like we keep them in our little badges so that you've got them right there with you. And we share them when we have professional development and other meetings.
Well, this work has been years in the making, and it is so exciting to see that we're at this place now. And I just want to acknowledge how hard this work is. I think that there is a misconception amongst the general public, and a lot of this has to do with how media reports on restorative practices, that somehow it is accountability light or discipline light, and it's anything but, right? Truly engaging in restorative practices is difficult relational work. It takes a lot of vulnerability. It takes a lot of risk. And the power that's contained within these practices to rebuild relationships and communities and make those foundations really strong and healthy and thriving can't be overstated. And so I see on this, I forget which slide 7, there was a piece around prioritizing funding and time, so dedicated resources. And we know that that's what this takes to keep this work going, and to make sure that we don't lose all of the momentum and the work that's been done so far. I know that a lot of the funding streams available that come from outside the district that could fund restorative practices are unstable. And so I'm curious about kind of what funding models look like moving forward. I know we're going to be discussing this as a board during our budget season. What sort of outside funding sources you've been looking at? One thing that's been on my radar is the new Office for Restorative Practices. It was legislation authored by Representative Feist last session, and there are going to be grants available through that. So I'm wondering if we're tapping into any of those external resources.
Thank you. Another great question, and one that's near and dear to me. So first, let me just, especially for newer board members, let you know, our district has done something that I don't know of any other districts in the state doing. We give dedicated dollars to every single site to give a 0.5 FTE for a restorative culture representative leader at each site. That work is incredible. It does more for us, and we are so far beyond so many other districts in the state. I think really most other districts in the state, because of that dedicated support. Now, what to do to try to get more funding coming in. I've been looking for grants. I haven't found them. I'm not seeing them. Yeah. But we are, diligently keeping an eye out and researching and studying and looking for them. And I also I think a lot about how restorative culture right now at the district level, it's living in design and learning, teaching curricularly, but it's really, it's something that is, it's greater than that. And so when we think about funding as a district, I'm hoping that we're thinking about how it lives so that we think about how to support it.
I was at an, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I just said part of the core.
Yeah. Yes. I was at an event last week with members of the Biden administration who are working on youth justice issues, broadly speaking, and doing a lot around prevention and working with public schools. And it sounds like there'll be some dedicated federal funding, so I will follow up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
May I share something quick? So, Maria, I also have a funding opportunity that I can send from you that just came out today from the Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation.
Thank you.
For early childhood. I mean, yeah, education and to support families. And then for the sake of time, I know that we're getting up there, but just wanted to connect with you about like the suspensions and just like what you're finding in the district, and want to just, connect with you about, some of the strategies or some of the things that are happening around mitigating the high suspension rates, or if they are high suspension rates. So, right.
Yeah, so repeat your question again, sorry.
No, so I was just saying that for the sake of time, I would like to connect with you about like about the suspensions and just kind of just understanding what you're finding in the district around that, and like the
Yeah.
numbers, and really want to just see like what is being done to address suspension, especially in the so.
And direct those questions to Dr. Mary Perry Reed, and then I'd be happy to get the information to you, to the entire board,
Yeah.
so that you've got some clear data on where we've been historically, where we are now, and what we're doing to meet scholar needs rather than reprimand. And yeah, does that help?
Yep, that perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. In closing, I'm wondering if Chair Andreessen, as one of the leaders of restorative culture in our district, would you recite the verse that's left for us by Howard Sayre?
Yes, thank you. I'd be happy to. Restorative justice is respect. Respect for all, even those who are different from us, even those who seem to be our enemies. Respect reminds us of our interconnectedness, but also of our differences. Respect insists we balance concern for all parties. If we pursue justice as respect, we will do justice restoratively. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria and Anne. Thank you.
Is it Mr. Carr?
Yes, as the slide deck is coming up, just short introduction. Thank you all for allowing me and Fonda and our team to be present and have a conversation with you about the work that this holistic school safety team has been undertaking, and to share when we think about, and I think that you will see as we talk through the work that we are at, finding harmony with what you were just presented with in terms of this restorative culture and practices. Because as we talk about holistic school safety and looking at this not just in and through the lens, which is very common for people to default when we talk about safety and security, it becomes a very tactical, a very physical or technological discourse. And that is, while those may be tools that are implemented or utilized, that is not necessarily what indicates a safe and secure environment, especially when we talk about within schools. Considering things like proactive assessments, where there might be bullying or cyberbullying, looking at mental health support systems and resources that help direct or redirect people in positive and healthy decision-making. And also thinking about the sadly all too common discussion on when violence is perpetrated within educational environments. What are those elements and things that have been demonstrated that can be both deterrent and preventative, so that we are not talking about exclusively response and recovery efforts, but we are talking about what can we keep from happening in the first place. And so this is where we start. My name is Chris Carr. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a graduate of Hopkins schools. Another shout out for class of 97.
That's right.
Yep. And also have 3 boys who are in the high school and at West Middle School. And so we have been on this course for the better part of the last couple of years of effective assessment and determination of where we move forward to create this more safe environment that students, faculty, staff are able to feel the most supported in going into both relationally and academically to be the best selves in that. Next slide, please. So as we talk through, some of this will be some of our review work to share some of the programs that we have already begun working within. Also sharing about how are we doing some of the assessment pieces, and then what has the team been at, what have we accomplished, where are we currently, and then what are we moving into. So as we think through, and next slide please. Prepare is one program that was trained and will be an ongoing training piece for our district going forward, specifically around the consideration and operationally implementing a mental health aspect into critical event response and critical event intervention, and how do we think about not just the physical safety of people and managing that process in the midst of an incident or an emergency, but also to be able to prevent, mitigate mental trauma that can be perpetrated within an event as well. Case study and events demonstrate that those emotional aftermath and collateral impact that take place for especially young people in the midst of a critical incident or an emergency can have equal, if not more long-standing injury to that student's well-being, far beyond what a physical injury might entail. So this is a program that has been part of our incident command structure and helped shape that incident command structure on both a school level as well as a district level, and been part of that training for faculty and staff going into the school years, and will continue to be part of what we do within that. Another piece is, and that I'm going to defer to Director of Special Services, Fonda Contreras, is to talk about the Character Strong program.
Good evening, Fonda Contreras, Director of Special Services. So one of the things that Chris talked about is preventative. And so the more proactive we can be with getting social skills out to students, which is part of our Vision 2031 for the holistic learner, is engaging them and making sure they are feeling belonged, making sure that there's a sense of belonging. Character Strong is a SEL support system that covers the components of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And we believe that these supports, when students have access to this and they're being taught explicitly these skills, that it will decrease some of the events where harm happens. And in addition to panorama surveys and the Character Strong, which is geared towards secondary, this curriculum is being used in 50 states, 47 countries. It's touching 6.7 million students and over 240,000 educators. So we've had the opportunity to partner with one of the creators of Character Strong, who has trained our staff at the secondary level for free. And the only ask is that we use it with fidelity. So what a gift to us to be able to have this. I'm not even sure how much it would cost. We did start it last year with our secondary sites. And then our elementary schools have the opportunity to use the partner curriculum, Purposeful People. And again, it focuses on those skills to build up students' so that it does decrease emergency situations that we have to go through. As Chris mentioned, we did train staff last year, the 22-23 school year, on the prepare model, so that if we have incidences, we know how to respond. There still is work to do to make sure that it's rote, but the good thing is that we don't have that many incidences. I mean, that's the hope. I don't know if it's an exact correlation, and I'm sure there's other contributing factors, but we, the holistic team, has had to respond to less incidences, less intense incidences since the rollout. And again, I'm sure there's other mitigating factors that helped with that, but we did roll this out in secondary. So more to come. We do want to see increased use. I think we've had some of our scholars report out that they were getting it in some spaces and not others. So we do want to increase the fidelity so that what it is set out to do, we can accomplish. Next slide.
Thank you, Fonda. One of the other important elements that we have been working on, and that is an area that is a big part of my focus occupationally and within my work, is around effective risk and threat assessment. And this is risk and threat assessment that is founded in the ability for people who are trained, who are paying attention, to be aware of actions and behaviors that correlate to other case studies that have been demonstrated before something takes place, whether we talk about something like self-harm, suicide, or an externalized violence, that we have the ability to identify indicators that do correlate with people who are on a pathway or escalation toward violence, whether it is self-directed or externally directed. And so some of the tools that we have available to us that Special Services has utilized, and in collaboration with our holistic school safety team, that we have explored and there are admittedly a wealth of resources that different entities and agencies across the spectrum have utilized over the course of time, and some that are very specific to school environments and academic environments, but not just student-based, but faculty, staff, collateral, family members, partnerships, spouses, et cetera. And so to be able to do that work and to be able to provide an effective threat assessment or crisis assessment, as my friend James Densley, who wrote the book The Violence Project with his colleague Jillian Peterson from Hamline University, to be able to do that work and assess and identify those who may be in crisis where violence might be an outcome, that is a critical part for us to both take seriously and provide and circle the person or persons with resources to direct, to deter, to put them in a healthier space and change the course of that pathway toward violence. So these are some of the resources and process we really want people to be. Go ahead.
Yep.
Fonda.
So our school social workers and counselors are trained in the Columbia risk assessment in case they see signs or students verbalize that they are wanting to self-harm. And so they are trained in that to be able to respond appropriately.
Next slide, please. So back in 2019, we brought in as a district a gentleman by the name of Michael Rosen, who has his company Rosen Security Consulting, who did a comprehensive risk assessment and strategy, we called across the board strategy visioning about what within the entire school district of Hopkins might be explored, what is our current status in terms of physical, technological, and systems that were most present, what are some of their assets, and what are some of our vulnerabilities? What are the most likely hazards or threats that might be experienced within Hopkins schools, and then being able to make some projected aggregate budgetary placeholders that were not that were presented in a manner that had a kind of cumulative cost, but would be projected into costs or budgetary cycles over 5 to 10 years. So we've taken that particular report and went through and did an audit in 2022 to assess whether those issues were still present post-COVID shutdowns and change in our education settings, to see what was still present, what was still relevant to those particular settings, and then we're able to kind of come back and say, all right, what are our highest priorities, what are of greatest urgency, and again, focusing ourselves really on this prevention mindset. What are the things that will have the greatest impact cumulatively and collectively across the district? Next slide, please. So just to kind of lay out, again, the foundation of who we are as a team, this is a multidisciplinary group that comes together and does this work of conversation, of assessment. If there are incidents that have taken place across the school district of any safety concern or incident, we do a afterward debrief to discuss, are there learnings that we can take away? What have been some of the feedback that we've received from staff or faculty or leadership that we can incorporate or vision forward? As we can see, next slide, please. So the things that we have done within our work here of doing walkthroughs and interviews with every principal across the district, as well as safety teams, to identify where those existing or new vulnerabilities might take place, and providing recommendations for process or procedures. Specifically, and one of the things that we heard most prevalently had a great deal to do with things like ingress, egress, or access to the buildings. People being able to come and go, who's coming in, how is their accountability to who's in the buildings at particular times? How are the buildings being secured at particular times? Are they not? How open access do we want, both for after school programs, for community ed, et cetera? This is, as well as how are those spaces being monitored? Not necessarily as a monitoring for, people necessarily doing everything wrong, but to have an awareness that, if a space is passively monitored, there is inherently the most likelihood is we're going to have to respond to something. If we have more of an active monitoring, we have a better likelihood of intervention or prevention of something manifesting as a problem. We've also been undertaking training around prepare, as well as going to schools and providing cursory emergency response trainings, talking through what are the effective crisis response strategies that we have as a district-wide initiatives, being able to field questions and concerns around site-specific nuances and elements, and been able to establish and revise and get in a healthy rhythm of revision of the incident command structures that each school has in place and who's in what respective roles associated with emergency response. As well as planning and coordination with our community and public safety for larger scale events, such as some of the high school football games, culture night. We actually had an innovative process of having some student partnerships around active safety and making sure that those events were received and were able to be carried out with an open and welcoming, as well as a safe and secure mindset and presence, which was pretty exciting. And then also being able to prioritize our initiatives based on the elements that are included within Vision 2031, specifically around operations and culture. Those are the areas that the holistic school safety team has specific areas of focus. Next slide, please. So within our priorities, we refined down the pieces that we have really been able to take and move and put some action behind, specifically around the operations within 2031 of being able to assess and look at our technology, our security technologies that we have available to us, both the existing systems and what can be utilized going forward to make those efficient and effective, specifically around camera systems, district-wide camera systems, and making sure that those can be utilized both in an effective way at individual schools as well as through district-wide monitoring. Visitor management was also identified as a priority as we surveyed staff and surveyed the safety teams and faculty, finding that visitor management was a significant concern in terms of being able to know and manage who is within the building that may not be part of the regular traffic and presence. And so that as being one of our technology priorities. And then finally, as we talk about things like detection and alarm systems, specifically one of the conversations around things like vape detection systems in bathrooms, or door alarms, or how are we able to assess whether a door has been opened at one part of the building or another from the inside that might not have otherwise the ability to be monitored. So those are some of our technology priorities, and we'll talk a little bit about what is our next step there. We've also identified our training within culture, that culture piece, and to be able to train and provide the tools and resources, because I will always profess and say that the human element is the most effective safety and security tool resource we have available to us. And so being able to train people in, as we talked about, prepare and the mental health aspects. Myself, John Wetter, and Brian Stanley went through a training called I Love You Guys, which is developed for schools specifically around emergency engagement and specifically around establishing processes for parent and student reunification in the event of a critical incident. How do we bring students and parents or caregivers back together if there's something like an evacuation or something of that nature, and doing so in a safe and supportive way that's well organized and cared for. And then also talking about CPI as a tool training-wise that is around de-escalation of elevated or dysregulated behaviors, and then mitigation. Next slide, please. So our next processes within this are to talk through, as we look at technology, our what does our relationship with a technology integrator look like? Currently, we are using one that we are looking to migrate into a new relationship that can help us out in a more effective way and also help us audit our systems technology-wise to make sure that we are being as cost-effective, efficient, but also utilizing the most innovative technologies to maximize the tool. By doing so, getting some pricing and proposals for our projects, and then looking at budgeting and implementation for our most urgent needs within the scope of both available funds and then being able to project out for future budget cycles. And as we are looking at what's next for our culture, we are continuing to revise our district crisis management plan to reflect and the resources that I Love You Guys, developed by a family who was the victim as a family of violence within a school setting. And this training is really, I was very impressed with it, but being able to align the language that is used in crisis response with that particular training, and then providing these tools, safety for the school safety teams for de-escalation and mitigation. And then finally talking through, and I'm happy to follow up with Mr. McCullough from earlier comments, but talking about what does it look like for our meeting and collaboration. We have had in our leadership teams conversations with local first responders, Minnetonka, Hopkins, Golden Valley, local law enforcement, as well as within the fire department's emergency response, et cetera, and what do those partnerships look like going forward. But these are part of those collaborative efforts that we have been able to establish in relations. So with that, I will, next slide, please, ask if there are questions.
Chair Andreessen?
Yes, first, thank you for that. I love that there was intersection between the two presentations. And yes, Treasurer Hartland.
Thank you. I want to first say thank you to everyone who sits on that committee. I think it is fair to say that the type of work that you're doing to prevent and mitigate and improve in our system falls under the category of worst nightmares, no matter what hat it is that we're wearing as a board member, as a parent, as a teacher. And so I hate that we have to have so much focus on this, but appreciate the time and certainly feel better for it. I, along with Chair Andreessen and Director Roper, we sit on our Legislative Action Coalition, and amongst our asks of our legislators this year was to increase the Safe Schools levy to triple it per pupil and increase the allowable uses for that. And I was wondering, beyond that, are there ways in which the board or our committees, our student board reps, anyone can help with this? Do you have asks specific for us?
I think, at least from my standpoint, I think that advocacy, because this is inherently one of the biggest obstacles, is often around funding, right? At the same time, I think when we talk about culture and we talk about the ability to, and I will lean back into it, sometimes the ability to create processes and have a supported effort and have this prioritized, people can sometimes be, as I said, our most important safety and security resource. To be able to provide effective training, to be able to empower people to, if there is a concern, to speak up. And candidly, some of the most important threat mitigation or incident mitigation that we have had has also come with an active role of students involved in a very positive way. And so I think while these are very difficult, as you say, these are not fun, these are hard conversations. I also think that the empowerment of students, of faculty, of staff to recognize and say, it is important for people to speak up and be engaged in that process and to really own a role within creating that culture that is safe and secure. And I say this as an and, not as a but, because sometimes these become conflicting concepts of this is also an open and welcoming and inclusive environment, that you can be both and all, and that these are not contradictory concepts. So I think that as a board, as leadership, one of the most important things that can be supported is that empowerment and to really recognize the importance of it and to continue to hold it as a priority.
I think that's a thing that we can reflect on and work on here, and appreciate all of your guys' input.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes, I believe Director Thompson raised his virtual hand.
Sorry, I didn't see that.
If you're okay with Director Thompson, if you'd like to ask your question.
Of course.
Or comment.
Thanks, Chair Andreessen, I appreciate it. And thanks to all the presenters this evening. It's been really good to see all this work happening. Just so I'm understanding this correctly, you had shown the, this is to Mr. Carr, you had shown the, the committee that works together, and you had a consulting firm by your name. So how many districts do you do this consulting work for?
So I started doing this consulting work in 2021 and established this relationship not very long after. So this is the one that I'm working with right now. I do work in a different capacity outside of this particular consulting relationship too, and do work with nonprofits as well as houses of worship, different faith communities as well. So, you all are my first, so.
Okay, thanks.
Director Westmoreland?
I have two questions. They're both about partnerships. So the first is you mentioned a partnership with students around an event at the high school. Sounds really innovative and wonderful and relational, and wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what that looked like.
Sure. I will have to, while this was something we had discussed at different points, I will defer to the visionary wisdom of Lorenzo Farley, and as he was creating planning and strategy for Culture Night, and was able to talk to a group of about 7 or 8 students who he had done some empowerment for just being an active presence around the school. And if there were people, whether they were students or otherwise, in parts of the school that the programming was not taking place, they were simply asking people to move to the places where the program was taking place. And then the staff leadership and myself, I did a very short brief in on, hey, if you're encountering a situation that you're uncomfortable with, let Farley know, let myself know, and we'll communicate. And within it, actually the event I found went very smoothly. And it was impressive to really see how much ownership the students who were involved with it took, and that there was that existing relationship with their peers that also gave them some opportunity to ask people to make different choices about how they were, where they were, and how they were spending their time. And I found it to be really effective modeling, so it was exciting, I thought.
Like tapping into that peer-to-peer credibility too,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Second question around partnerships is, what has our partnership looked like with local emergency responders? So I'm thinking like EMS, fire, police.
Sure. So early on, I had some meetings with some of the local first responding agencies, in particular on public safety, and to get an understanding of some of that prior existing relationship from their side, as well as talking about it within our particular district leadership. And then as we have moved forward in those efforts, to really establish what are those expectations when, and to really provide some clarity in terms of, for them to say what are they doing when they are called on, what is important for district or school leadership to communicate when they are needing support, and how that can dictate the different scalability. There is often an expectation that if 911 is called or something, that there is a kind of a uniform response that can feel far more tactical and far more intrusive than what is actually an opportunity. Like, there are other levels that partnership and participation can be. And so being able to have dialogue and have that understanding and let the face-to-face interaction and say, this is what we need, how can we get that? How do we contact somebody within this particular agency and assist us? And I think that there have been some healthy practices established, especially around assessments, before something is escalating to a point that there might have to be a more critical response. And by doing so, it changes that dynamic. It changes the relationship. It puts people in a position of relationship building as opposed to more tactical response.
3 of our cities have added social workers to their forces to kind of help with certain situations, like if it's around mental health. So like Chris said, it doesn't have to be just coming in with the tactical response, but they can be more responsive to the individual needs based on calls. So they have met with members of us on the committee to kind of say, hey, call us directly. And and there's a couple police chiefs that have said, like, call us directly if you all are having something go on, so that we can respond in a way that isn't alarming to students. And then one of the cities has been very vigilant about actually two. We've had some sessions with students at the high school to kind of build and bridge relationships.
Okay.
So we've had like some circles of healing and restoration where students could be vulnerable and ask questions and vice versa, to kind of bridge post-George Foreman kind of some relationships so that there doesn't have to be a fear immediately upon response. So that was work with community ed and special services last year and our high school administration to bring in different students. So I think that happened a couple different times. So bridging and then also having different responders to situations.
Thank you. This isn't necessarily a question that I expect you to have an answer to right now, but I'm wondering, as part of our policy committee, our monitoring committee, if you're noticing as you're trying to implement these new practices or more nuanced adaptive practices, I liked you talking about scalability, is there the need for updated policy, district policy, or MOUs, or things like that? So don't need to have specific answers right now, but we are at your disposal as a policy and monitoring committee to work on that.
I think that would be, it would be helpful to definitely have some review of what those are and seeing if those are still language-wise appropriate to what our goals are within that. So yes, no, I appreciate that. And I think by being, and I also do special deputy work. It's volunteer, it's not work. But with Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, some of their critical incident, but also specifically around intervention, prevention modeling for security threat assessment, and work in a lot of different disciplines. The school district, there's a collaborative communication tool that a number of different school security professionals are on across the state, that if there is something that is relevant to any particular regional concern or something that has come up, and we've often been able to have healthy partnership across school district through that model within Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. So I think there's a lot of resources at our disposal too.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Chair Andreessen, I do have a quick question.
Yes, thank
to
you.
Director Fonda. You mentioned after the rollout of Character Strong, we had less than 10 incidents. Could I get a sense for maybe what it was before the rollout? Was it more than, obviously, but how much more?
Did
Just
you
in
say
general.
intense or 10?
I thought you had said there was less than 10, or?
Less intense.
Oh, less intense, okay.
Yes.
All right, okay. I think that would be an interesting metric, just
We're
because we
striving
rolled
for
it out.
less
we have-
than 10.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, okay, great. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
I promise it'll be quick. So if we have any insights about like, or recommendations for like a safety protocol that we may have personally like witnessed or experienced ourselves, could we get in contact with you, or like how should we submit that?
Certainly.
And I know that we have a safety committee, right? Or don't we meet like once per? I can't remember who was on this. I think I signed up for the safety committee. I don't know if we meet with you.
We'll have, I don't remember if we said it was going to be once or twice a year, but our district holistic safety committee will meet formally with the board reps once or twice a year.
Okay. So in between.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause I know I signed up for one of the committees, but in between time, I would love to provide some insight into some safety measures. And so, would maybe direct that question or direct that email to you, or should I
Maybe
direct
to me,
it?
sure. And maybe you could visit one of our committee meetings, or we'll figure out what the venue for that could be.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have email, the district, the holistic district safety team has an email address, but I would defer to Dr. Mary Piri Reed as well, and my contact information is available through that too.
Okay.
So, yeah, be happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just had a quick question if there weren't any others. I appreciate Director Westmoreland, you bringing up the Policy and Monitoring Committee, because one of the things I wanted to bring up is that I really appreciate that there's this intersection of mental health and the crisis response, because that is one of the things that came up when we were working over the summer with school staff around our mental health and wellness policy. And we also spoke about the prevention, intervention, postvention piece, and I was happy to see that laid out very nicely in our district's approach. And so I think it would be nice if the Policy and Monitoring Committee could bring some of those recommendations and pieces that we left off our policy, thinking it was more appropriate for your team, that there would be kind of working together around that for making sure that we're in alignment with our policy practice and district-wide fidelity.
That's good.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that a lot. And then I'm wondering about the Character Strong program. I love that that's happening and that our students are feeling empowered to show up and be themselves in spaces. Can you give me an idea of who was trained? And also, I often think about when we talk about social emotional learning, just how much of that is part of daily life in special education and in our support services. So how does that intersect with the resources we already have in our district and in our buildings through special education? And then who is trained and how is it getting rolled out?
Mm-hmm. So we have tiers of SEL across all sites. And so in particular, like our speech and social works, they're using everyday speech in every single site with our students that need more unique programming. And so then we have Character Strong. It was rolled out at all 3 secondary sites and expected to be a part of Tier 1. So again, the fidelity is the measurement that our partners with Character Strong are looking for. And so, yeah, that's a good question on when and how often. I know Opportunity Hour was a time that the high school tried to build it in, as well as some of the times during the 2 middle schools. So yes, I'm not sure if all classrooms are doing it, but that was the expectation. Yeah. And so then we have other tiered curriculum that I could share with you that our other folks are using.
Wonderful.
To meet the needs of each learner.
And so the staff that's doing that in the secondary schools, is that the paras were trained? I'm just wondering who was trained on it?
Classroom teachers.
Oh, wow, great.
Mm-hmm.
So the curriculum is facilitated in advisories.
Okay.
And often the counselors or a counselor or a lead will send out an email saying, okay, here is the focus for this week's lesson. And what we've learned is that teachers who are more comfortable with social emotional learning content, this is an area that's easy for them to facilitate the Character Strong lesson, and other teachers are growing their comfort over time.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. And second step is the main curriculum at the elementary level, and some people are adding different things too as well. So, but second step, and then there's a few elementaries willing to pilot purposeful people. So, yeah.
Great.
Everyone should have something that they're using.
I've seen it. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for your time and all the information. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you.
Did you like how we just gave you something to do, Vice Chair Ross?
What's that?
I asked if Vice Chair Ross liked how we gave him something to do.
I know, sorry, Vice Chair
Just by
Ross.
asking questions.
It's all good.
And now we will move on to our nutrition services contract and ask Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot to join us at the table and turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reed to introduce this part of the meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Lightfoot, for joining us. So in the past, we've actually put tentative agreements on the consent agenda, but we, out of respect for our newest board members, we wanted to put this item on new business so that Dr. Lightfoot could just provide an overview of the negotiations process with our school nutrition employees and where we landed. And thank you, Dr. Lightfoot.
Thank you all. Good to be with you this evening. I'm reflecting on Treasurer Hartland's words of funding the vital parts, which I think are accurate and refer directly to the information that's in front of you this evening, particularly the work that's been ongoing with the school nutrition staff. Particularly, we've been in conversation with them about their agreement for the 23-24 and 24-25 school year. That's what you see in front of you this evening with the documents provided. As part of just a reminder of the process, we do meet with them. We work through information items that they feel that the contract can work toward. We come away with those agreements. We look at a tentative agreement. Then that tentative agreement moves forward for membership to vote and moves forward for your review as well. Once that is agreed upon and both entities are have approved, we then move forward with any of the financial modifications that are necessary as well. So those are the upcoming steps. The school nutrition membership did ratify, meaning that they have voted in support of this agreement. And it is in front of you this evening with the related changes to the language as well as the costing components that are associated with the new terms and conditions that we have worked through. I would say a couple of the highlights in this is that we did work through some clarification and language around vacation and how that was earned and how that could be delivered more clearly with some situations that had caused some confusion for members. We worked to clarify that language and put that in there. As well, we clarified some of the information regarding summer assignments, spent some time also looking at the comparisons with the neighboring districts. Part of the adjustments that we looked toward specifically were designed to do that in the Class 2, as well as the entry points within the salary schedules to be competitive as we looked across the region where we were looking at comparables in our neighboring districts as well. So with that, it just gives an overview of the items that we've been focused on. If there are specific questions, I'm more than happy to address those as members would have them.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues before I cough? Excuse me. I don't see anything from Director Thompson. I would just like to note, thank you for bringing this to the table. And just wondering if you could give a sense of the estimated cost of the agreement is 9.19 over the 2 years. Is
Correct.
that in line with prior agreements? Where are we kind of at?
Yeah, it is. And part of what we looked at were, like I said, part of the adjustments in specific spaces. What we know from the work that we did was we were seeing more of the focus that we needed to do in order to remain competitive in the early stages of the agreement. So we did put more dollars there, and in particular, Class 2 of the general worker population we were looking at as well. When we do school nutrition, there also is that component that we do work directly with business services on, and looking at this as revenue estimates as well with the program, because as you know, part of this funding is raised through participation. And with the change in the legislation, what we had to look at were some of the estimated, what would the return look like based on increased participation within the program, how we would view some of those revenue elements, would there be any a la carte components? So in answer to your question, this is a little bit higher than we have seen before in previous contracts, in part relative to a market that does see labor markets increasing in what they're providing. And so, yes, it is a little bit larger with that, but we also intentionally looked at what that cost was and making sure that revenue components could also be built into that so that we would know as much as we could ahead of time with the estimated amounts coming from increased participation in breakfast as well as lunch. So it's a longer answer question to something that, yeah, it was a little bit larger, but here's why.
That was good information. Thank you. I also just wanted to note that I felt particularly proud to be from Hopkins when I was in Washington, D.C. last week. We were advocating for public education, and one of the things we were advocating for at Capitol Hill was healthy, nutritious meals for all, which we have in Minnesota. But one of the issues that a lot of these other school districts brought up was that they can't get kids to eat the food that's approved by the federal government. And I was just sitting there going, why is this an issue? And I realized most of them do not have school nutrition departments that provide scratch cooking. And we in Hopkins do, so we can cater our food to our students and our community. And I felt really proud. It's a wonderful program, and I am thrilled that we've got another contract for our amazing employees that bring this nutritious food to our families and our students. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And specifically, that was a point of recognition and pride among the members in looking at how they continue to support the labor and the materials that go into allowing us to do that.
Yes, we have great employees. Well, thank you. I don't see any more questions. Appreciate your time.
And I would look for or need a motion for approval.
Is there a motion to, sorry, let me get down there.
I move that we approve the nutrition services contract.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And the contract is passed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
And you can stay at the
Dr.
table.
Lightfoot, do you want to stay for the next thing?
I think you're on our next.
Please stay.
I think I have to do too much for this one, do I?
Element, yes. So we're going to do a resolution, but first, yeah, how would we like to do this? Would we like to do public comment after we pass the resolution and before we go into executive session? So just making that clear to our public that we will be passing this resolution to go into executive session pursuant to Minnesota Open Meeting Law, Minnesota Statute 13D.03, to discuss negotiation strategies related to the HEA Hopkins Education Association contract for the 2023-24 school years. And we will do that immediately following and then come back in and adjourn the meeting. So do we need to read the resolution and do a roll call vote? Clerk Thompson, we're going to need your services to do a roll call vote after we read the resolution.
Sure.
It is hereby resolved that the, oh wait, first we need a motion, right, for the resolution?
I move that we approve the resolution that Chair Andreessen is about to read.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Wait, do you want to do a roll call?
We need a roll call.
Do I need to read the resolution though first?
So the motion is to approve the resolution. So if you want to read the resolution, and then we'll have Clerk Thompson do the roll call.
Great, thank you. It is hereby resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 270, Hopkins, Minnesota, meet in executive session to discuss negotiation strategies related to the HEA contract for the 2023-24 school years, that the meeting be held in person and commence immediately following adjournment of this regular meeting. Further, that it be noted that all board members, superintendent, and clerk were duly notified of intention to call this executive session. Roll call vote, please, Clerk Thompson.
I will take the roll now. Chair Andreessen,
Aye.
Treasurer Hartland,
Aye.
Director Roper,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ross,
Aye.
Clerk Thompson, aye. Director Zhao,
Aye.
Director Westmoreland.
Aye.
We have all 7 ayes, it's unanimous.
Thank you, Clerk Thompson. So now we will, thank you, Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot. Now we will move into board member reports. Anyone have anything?
Chair Andreessen, I would like
Yes.
to just,
Dr. Zhao?
yeah, okay. So I'm wearing this shirt today because it is Chinese New Year on the Saturday. And the Xingxing program has prepared a performance at the Hopkins High School at 6 o'clock on Thursday. The kids and the teachers have worked very, very hard to prepare something for it, and so just to encourage everybody, including the public, it's open to everybody at the Hopkins High School on Thursday. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Happy New Year. 新年快乐.
Happy New Year.
新年快乐.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah.
I tried.
Yeah,
I
It's good.
had to go way back.
Very good, very good.
Anyone else?
I have just 2 quick things. So excited to share with everyone that I was recently accepted into a national fellowship for school board partners. And so, oh yeah. Oh, are we starting this? Okay.
Never ended it.
Okay. So I am just really excited to share the resources that I'm going to be learning and to connect with you all on that and, just sharing our expertise. So I just wanted to share that with you all. And I'll also share the resource and organization for you to also get involved. I think it'll be really important for all of us to make those national connections. And then also just on the 15th, I will be speaking with my coalition, Minnesota Advocates for Electric School Buses. I'll be talking about the importance of electric school buses and how school board members can play a role in getting them mobilized in their districts. And so if anyone's interested in the information, I have the little card right here, and you can use the QR code to register to vote election, register to come to the event. It's online and it's from 6 to 7:30, February 15th. So here we go.
Mm-hmm. That's all great news.
Thank you.
Did you raise your hand, Director Thompson?
It was inadvertent.
Oh, okay. I don't see any other reports. So then we can move on to our second section of public comment. I would like to invite Mike Harris up to do a comment, public comment, while we read our guidelines before, so welcome. I appreciate you waiting this long to give comment to the board.
Evening, Mr. Harris.
Hi. Just before I start, though, I just wanted to mention that I'm a parent, like all of you. I'm a teacher at the high school, and I'm a coach. So I've got a couple different lenses, and these are some of the finest kids that you'll be around. So if you want to see the real skinny of how Character Strong is working, ask your kids, ask these kids, and let them be honest. Just kind of FYI. If you're talking about it, let's see if it's worth your time. And if they're honest, hopefully they will be. You can get some good feedback. Just kind of FYI.
Okay.
Ready?
Yes, would you like to have a seat, or
What's that?
would you like to have a seat?
I've been sitting for a couple hours now.
Okay. Haven't we all?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I just wanted to mention that I'm looking for some evidence and positivity on some of our late start changes that was happening. So it's good to hear that we're coming back. It's not a dead end. And I just want to give some feedback for the board members to consider when it looks at activities after school. We are in a conference that is the most competitive in certainly Minnesota and probably sometimes in the country in all the activities that we do. And so what I'm going to tell you is that we're at a competitive disadvantage with this current schedule, whether you realize it or not. When I say that, because we're depending more and more on our middle school programs, 7th and 8th graders, that are competing at the varsity levels sometimes or JV levels, but mostly the varsity levels. And when we do that and they're released at different times, it throws a monkey wrench in trying to organize a practice or even going to a competition. And I don't know if you realize that, but then all of a sudden we're setting ourselves up for a different type of outcome than what I would have come to expect. So that's something that I want us to at least look at. A lot of the kids had jobs before the schedule changes, and now it's almost impossible to have a job and be part of a program at the high school level now. And I know that you speak to some of the kids, they'll tell you the same thing. The dependence on the middle school in some of the programs that I'm involved with a fall cross-country program and a spring track program. Again, we're already considering traffic into the formula. Even if we go to our local schools in our conference, like Buffalo, our kids are missing 2 to 3 blocks just to compete once a week. Now, if you look at a block schedule, that means that they're theoretically missing, for every 1 block, 2 class periods on a regular day. So some of our kids are the high flyers, like these 2 young ladies. They do not want to miss that class 4th block. But yet, in order to be competitive and travel, that's exactly what we're doing, especially since we're ending school later. So I want us to at least look at that as an option going back to an earlier start time so that we can release our kids earlier, we can travel to our destinations and hopefully miss less class and contact time with our kids. Because that's what's happening right now. And some of the other challenges I could bring up, but I'll just pause right here and saying that I would love to see things change to get back to where we were. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Have a great night.
All right, with that, we will go into closed session. I'll have to ask everyone to vacate.
Me too.
And we'll stop the YouTube live stream.
Yes.
Can I participate or?